Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening. I wanted today to delve into an issue which I've seen in a lot of left wing sites over the past several weeks, and that is a question, essentially, either explicitly or implicitly, of whether the left would rather have Donald Trump or Mike Pence be the president, let's say 6 months from now, in terms of the agenda, in terms of the difficulty or ease to oppose, to run against things like that. So I'd like to answer this question, and I think I have a fairly definitive answer, at least from my opinion. So here we go. Trump or Pence? Trump or Pence? Which makes the most sense? Now, I want to start off with a caveat. There are a lot of people that believe that there are pretty good odds that Trump will not make it to the end of his first term. In other words, that Mike Pence will become the president before 2021, if at all. Here is Slate from this week giving a 45% chance that Trump is impeached. Some sites are conflating this with impeached and convicted. I don't know if they are. Here is 538 from, I think, May 23rd, giving between a 25 and 50% chance of impeachment. I think that these odds are way too high. I think maybe a 5% chance of Trump's term ending early is more accurate. Let me flesh that out a bit. There are only 5 ways that a president can leave office early. One way is, of course, if he dies. I don't have any political comment on this. Trump is the oldest president ever to be elected, but he seems like he's hanging in there. A second way is that he just decides to retire, decides he's had enough. This has never happened to a president without enormous pressure. Lyndon Johnson was basically forced not to seek a second term, but quitting in the middle is just not what presidents tend to do. Although Trump seems to often hate his job, he's making too much money, too many crooked deals that benefit his family. It's likely that Trump has a lot of personal debt, and propping up his own businesses around the world with his foreign policy decisions is the way to get rid of that debt. It's not legal. It's not even close to legal, but that appears to be what's happening. Plus, somebody like Trump does not ever willingly relinquish his own power. I mean, think Erdogan, think Castro. Trump's ambition only moves in one direction. So number 3 is that he's caught in such a bad scandal that either he's about to be impeached and convicted, or he has no choice but to resign. That's what happened to Nixon. The problem here is that there doesn't seem to be anyone that is going to go to Trump and say, you have to go, and Trump isn't going to listen to anybody. He doesn't think he's ever done anything wrong. He would think that the scandal would just be a conspiracy theory. Trump is way more paranoid and way less self-aware than even Nixon was, and politicians no longer have the sense of civil duty to sort this out for the sake of the country like they did back then. It's now just kind of whatever you can get away with as long as the donors are happy. Number 4 is, of course, that he could be impeached and convicted, but it takes 67 senators, that's 2/3 of the Senate, in order to convict. In the House, it's just a majority, and I don't think there are enough disgruntled Republicans to impeach him, and I don't think the Democrats will take over the House in 2018. They're really such a terrible party right now. But even if they did, there's no chance of getting 67 Democrats in the Senate in 2018, or even like 62, or however many you might need to pick up a few Republicans. Right now, the Democrats have 48 seats. That's including King and Sanders. The map in 2018 looks terrible for Senate Democrats, so even if they miraculously break even if they gain 3 seats and get a majority, they're still nowhere near able to convict Trump in an impeachment trial. And the 5th way is through the 25th Amendment, and that's the most inconceivable of all of these. Half the cabinet, this cabinet, would have to declare Trump unfit for office, and even then it's only temporary. Trump would fight it, and then there'd be a whole thing. There's no way this happens. So I don't even think this is a possibility that we have to wrestle with and strategize much about, but it does inform some of the resistance against Trump, so I'm commenting on it. Normally, I would lay out all the cases and then make a verdict at the end, but here I'm just going to give my verdict now and then explain it. I think it is pretty clear that it is better for the left to have Mike Pence as president than to have Trump, both because of what Pence would do in office now and also in terms of opposing him politically in 2018 and 2020. So as I just said, this probably won't happen, but this is what I feel we should be rooting for, which is Pence to take over. I'd like to try to knock down the 5 most common counter arguments that I've heard. In other words, the 5 arguments for why people would rather keep Trump. So, argument number 1 that I hear all the time is Pence is more competent. He knows how to get things done. Trump is a bumbling moron. Um, I do buy that Trump's a moron, but I don't buy the rest of it. He's going to get most of his agenda passed through this Congress. There have been a couple of things that have gotten delayed or screwed up a little bit, but we're only 5.5 months in. Republicans want Trump's agenda, which is tax cuts and repeal of Obamacare and deregulation and destroying public schools and cracking down on voting and on protesters and free speech and increasing the war budget and drilling and instituting Christian-based law and slashing the safety net. These are the reasons that they're Republicans. This is why they were supported by the Republican machine to get them into office. A few of them might personally dislike Trump. He might make a few things a little harder, but they all have the same agenda, more or less. It's like the late 70s Yankees, where they all hated each other, but they had the same goal of winning baseball games, so it didn't really matter. They're going to go down at least 80% of Trump's list. They don't need somebody more competent. All they need for Trump to do is to sign pieces of paper for them. They've already done enormous amounts of damage, and this is before they've even gotten a rapport going with Trump. Argument 2 is that Pence will do all of this stuff under the radar. Everybody hates Trump, but Pence sounds like a nice, stable guy, so that makes him more dangerous. I'm not buying this either. I think people are on to Pence. The people out in the streets marching against Trump know what kind of a person Pence is. I have no doubt that the mainstream media will absolutely love Pence, but he isn't going to fool anybody that's paying attention. Right now, even though Pence has been really quiet since taking office, his approval rating is right now in the low 40s. That's only a few points higher than Trump. If suddenly he is the person making all the decisions, there seems to be more room for him to go down than up, since it doesn't look like he's going to earn the favor of almost any Democrats. And if people do forget who he is, wait until he starts pushing his policies, and then we'll see how popular he is and how much he can stay under the radar. So I'm not buying that argument. Argument 3 is, look at what Pence did in Indiana. He has a much more monstrous agenda than Trump does. Now, on a few issues, mostly social, religious issues, this might be true, and I know that for some people these are the most crucial issues, and I respect and understand that. But the list of things Trump may still do that Pence probably won't do is still so devastating that I can't make the argument any other way. Either during the campaign or since, Trump has talked about the good old days where protesters left on stretchers. He's talked about dissolving courts that he doesn't agree with. He's talked about opening up the libel laws, which would pretty much end a free press. He's been very cavalier when he talks about nuclear weapons. He asks, why don't we use them if we have them? He suggested that maybe if we defaulted on our debt, we could get a better deal. He's talked about a citizen deportation force, and if he were to come out tomorrow, for example, and say, we need everybody's help to protect quote-unquote law and order in our streets, that is a catastrophe. We'd have thousands of armed posses of civilian racists going street to street, empowered by this sense of almost divine obligation to root out all of the supposed criminals, with Trump on their side and no real way to stop them. And then there's the other little issue of what happens if it becomes too unruly or too expensive to keep deporting all these millions of presumed illegal aliens. What if there are ambushes in transit and other problems? Trump is not going to direct ICE to stop grabbing people. They're just going to put them in detention centers and then not move them. And then they'll just, stay. Private contractors are probably right now making plans to turn these facilities into prisons, but, like dungeons, like forever. I'm not sure that Pence doesn't have all of these agenda items in mind. He might, but I do believe that this is the sort of thing on Steve Bannon's mind, and we can't have this. The fourth argument is that it would be harder to gain traction opposing Pence. I don't buy it. I know Trump on the surface has a lot more things to go after, but that's actually maybe been counterproductive because the Democrats have been more than happy going after Trump's personality and personal corruption instead of discussing policy issues. And they're doing this obviously because they don't want to upset their donors or their base, which are kind of on opposite sides in terms of policy. So the one thing they think they can get total support on is hatred of Trump. The problem is that hatred of Trump isn't working. Democrats are not winning elections on that message. They need to support policies that will appeal to the working class and the middle class and the poor. This is the lesson the Democrats are not going to learn easily, if at all, because they like corporate money too much. Um, they may, in fact, like the money more than they like winning, which is another huge problem. But the only way that there is a chance that Democrats will accidentally adopt the right strategy is if they're forced to talk about policies and oppose the president on policies. With Pence, all he's going to give you is terrible policies. There's no circus around him. So if Democrats want to even pretend like they're trying to beat him, they might stumble into making a policy case against him despite themselves, and that should make it easier to gain traction against him because that's what the base actually wants. And then argument number 5 is that because Republicans want a stable, true, well-spoken conservative, and Trump is divisive to their party, supposedly, Pence is harder to beat in 2020. I buy this argument the least of all of them. In 2016, Trump needed most of the Republican Party. He needed millions of people that were disenchanted with the process, people that would only show up to vote for someone they thought would tear apart the whole system. Plus, he needed workers that believed that he was going to save their jobs and improve their lives because he campaigned as a populist. And remember, he ran against someone who told the workers that everything was already great. And then, plus, he needed people who were conned by his supposedly being a brilliant businessman with so many successful deals. And he also needed people that just worshiped celebrity and pictured Trump as the boss because of The Apprentice. And with all of these people, and with massive disdain for Hillary out there, he still lost by 3 million votes. There's no way that Pence can secure that kind of a coalition. There aren't enough establishment evangelicals in the country to get a win for Pence. And he's not a good populist, he's not charismatic, he doesn't have any crossover appeal. I'm not totally sure why he would do that much better than Scott Walker, or Bobby Jindal, or Rick Perry, or Mike Huckabee, who were all Christian fundamentalist governors that ran in 2016, and none of them got any traction. The base saw 17 candidates, and they clearly chose the Trump model. That's who the party is now. If the Republicans in Congress have anything to do with Trump leaving office early, that's more likely to implode the party than if Trump stays in office. They have shown that they will rally behind Trump again and again. Pence has yet to show that he can command anywhere near that level of devotion to him. So, once again, the verdict is that the left should rather have Mike Pence as the president. All right? Here we go. To condense, no suspense, Pence makes the most sense. Thank you all.